Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for spending your morning with us, and welcome to the Green Burlett and Wheeler Method for Success webinar program on the Segal versus Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority case. We think that we have a very unique and interesting program for you all today. And if you're unfamiliar with our Method for Success program, or if this is your first one, this is a seminar where we present unique, interesting, and challenging cases that we've had and give tips and tricks that we hope will help you in your own practice. And this case absolutely fits that mold to a T. It's one of the most unique and challenging cases that I've ever had the opportunity to work on. And I think my co-presenter, Jeff Wells, who has a little bit more gray hair than me, will probably agree with that. And we'll tell you about that in a little bit, but this case, in a nutshell, basically involved a runaway dump truck that entered the intersection of Hollywood Boulevard, sideswiped a Metro bus, and then resulted in the Metro bus entering oncoming traffic and hitting our client's vehicle head on. Needless to say, this is a case that had a crazy fact pattern and presented unique challenges and obstacles that we had to overcome. But we were able to achieve a $7.5 million settlement for our clients on this challenging case, with $7.4 million coming from the Metro. So before we get into the program, I wanted to let you know that we try to make this program interactive, even given our limitations on the Zoom. If you see on the right side of your screen, there's a program where you can submit questions to us. Jeff and I will be presenting for about an hour and a half today, but we will try to reserve some time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please type them in, and we'll try to answer as many as we can if we have time at the end. Let me just provide a little brief introduction about who we are and who's going to be presenting today. My name is Christian Nickerson. I'm an associate at Green Burlett and Wheeler. I've been with the firm for about 10 years. I worked on this case, helping with pleadings, discovery, depositions, and motion work. Talk a little bit about some of that stuff today, which hopefully will be helpful to you. And I also had the opportunity to work on this case not only with great clients who we're also going to tell you about, but also with a great mentor in Jeff Wells. And I know that most of you know Jeff. He's a partner at our firm, Green Burlett, and has won numerous multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. He's previously president of CALA, and I think he's held pretty much every leadership position that you can hold in California. And you can read about all Jeff's accolades on our website. I won't go through them, but he truly did a masterful job on this case and for our clients who are in desperate need of help after this accident happened. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff, who will give you an overview of this accident, what happened in this case. Again, this is a crazy fact pattern that we had to deal with. And to this day, people ask me when I tell them about this case, how did you win that case? And well, that's exactly what this program is all about. So we're going to tell you how we did it. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to start with the kind of the basic facts of the accident, and we're going to start with the point of rest of the vehicles. So the point of rest of the vehicles shows you what, basically what happened at the end. But the key to this accident is going to be about 3 to 4 seconds before we got to the point of rest. So the vehicle, the silver BMW you see in the photograph here, that is being driven by mom taking her then 11-year-old daughter to school, and she's going essentially in a kind of a southbound direction on Hollywood Boulevard. It's 2 lanes each way. So she was actually in the number 2 lane, and the bus comes across and hits her head on at between 35 and 40 miles an hour in the number 2 lane. And the impact is just devastating. They have to cut mom out of the car. And also her daughter, who was also in the front seat, basically walked away with scratches and bruises and was not seriously injured in this accident. Next slide. Kind of looking down now, we're looking down at Hollywood Boulevard, and Hollywood Boulevard is going from your left to your right. And then the dump truck would be coming down from the top of this picture. And it was a home construction remodel job where they had a dump truck out in front of the house, and it was a mom and pop, actually father and son, dump truck company that had the dump truck, and it was on a hill They did not properly chalk the tires, which are wood blocks to put in front of the tires. And the truck started to go down the roadway from the top of this picture out into the intersection. Makes contact with the bus. The bus comes across the center line and hits our vehicle. Next slide. And you can see now this is a picture looking, the bus is in the far distance. There's the dump truck at its point of rest. And you can see that the hood actually was just like removed from the front of this dump truck and their impact. There's another shot of it there. And it wasn't that steep of a hill. The important part of this picture is we find out later on, if you see that little tire sticking up in the back of that dump truck, we find out later on that that was an aftermarket modification made by the dump truck company that added 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of weight to that dump truck that affected the parking brake system and was, in a sense, because of the limited coverage, very bad fact for us in the case. Next slide. And then again, the shot of the front of the dump truck. The other thing I want you to notice in these photographs is the time they're taking. It's a nice sunny day in Los Angeles with the blue sky you can see ahead of it, and the roadway's completely dry. And that's going to be an important fact later on too. So just keep track, remember that fact as we work through this. All right, next slide. And again, there's the bus to the right. You can see the dump truck down there. You can see how far the bus went after it was hit by the dump truck. And again, you know, just a very interesting, weird, dynamic case where you can see the bus comes all the way across the lanes of traffic. By the way, there were 2 lanes of traffic. You can see the fire departments that are parked there, but in the morning commuter hours, those are 2 lanes open, plus a center turn lane. Next. Again, point of rest of the bus. Next. And then here's a shot of the vehicle. It actually almost went underneath the bus. The impact was so great. The roof was removed from the jaws of life to extricate Mrs. Segal, and her daughter Alice was already outside the car when everyone arrived. And you can see in this photograph both airbags deployed. And again, another shout out for how important airbags are in a case like this. Next. And there's the final, you can see the front of that vehicle. I mean, there's just, you know, there's nothing left. And that's what it'll get when you get a 40,000 pound bus impacting even a BMW. And again, the passenger walks away and the mom is pinned in there with very serious life-threatening injuries at the scene. Next. And these were all photographs that were taken by the police. And then, you know, of course, we were able to use these as part of our presentation of this case. So obviously you want to get all these photographs. We also got news footage because there was a helicopter, LA, whatever the news station was, helicopter pulled over the top and was taking pictures as well. We were able to get all of that footage and all these photographs. Again, notice that it's a sunny day and it's dry out when the fire department is there. Next. Okay, just to kind of go through the litany of the injuries: fractured pelvis, she had a brain bleed, she had a neck fracture without spinal cord involvement, thank God, scapula, 12 broken ribs, broken forearms, I mean, a severed Achilles, it says bevered, but it means severed, severed Achilles tendon, and a very nasty injury. I mean, ultimately, brain injury that even the defense doctors say she had a traumatic brain injury. Okay, so it wasn't one of these cases where we're fighting over microscopic brain damage. It was, she was a disaster. She was in a halo. Go ahead, next. And then we had the illustrations again, and I recommend getting these illustrations still, outlining what these are taken from the x-rays, and it's an important part of the presentation of your case. We put this on both at the mediation and at the any discussions we would have with counsel about that. You can see the halo on the top right. You can see the multiple fractures she had in her body. She is and was a miracle person for sure. Next. And then again, we showed some of the injury, the spinal cord injury, and thank God she was lucky that she did not have spinal cord involvement on that. So she was able to recover the ability to walk. Next. Also, her daughter in this claim, in this case, so even though her daughter had basically soft tissue issues, injuries, she was, she saw her mom in this condition at the scene, groaning in the car. There's actually a neighbor that came out and talked to her and whatnot, but she had the classic Dylan claim of not knowing whether or not her mom was going to survive this accident. And then also her husband, Doug, who's probably the best client I've ever had, or on the top 1% of all clients I've had in 30 some years of practice. He has a great loss of consortium claim because he basically became his wife's nurse when she came home from the hospital after 4 months in the hospital. Next. Okay, the defendant. So when you're thinking about who you're going to sue in a case like this, remember this, that the obvious thing was the truck, right? The truck that rolled down the hill without a driver in it is an obvious defendant, but you don't know how much coverage that truck is going to have. Are they going to have 1 million? Are they going to have 5 million? Are they going to have 10 million? Well, you're going to find out they had 750,000, which was the California minimum, and no assets. So we named the truck driver, it's dump truck driver, who also was one of the owners of the company. And then we also named the truck manufacturer, which was a Peterbilt. And we did that because we didn't know if this was a brake failure with the parking brake or whatnot. So we weren't sure on that. You'll see I also named the LA County MTA bus driver. Very important in your case to name the bus driver. Why do I say that? Because when you name the bus driver and you also, we're going to get into that when we talk about the claim, but when you name the bus driver, you now have control over that driver. These drivers change jobs, they can leave the state. If the defense is representing them, which they're going to be required to do individually, they will have to present them and produce them for trial, for deposition and whatnot. So I always name the driver. If you want, you can, dismiss them later on in the case before trial if you think that's the way to go. But you have to keep control of that driver, and you have to be able to get them. And if they leave and the counsel says, hey, I don't know where they are, they're not my client, my client's the MTA, you could be in trouble on that. So that's why I named those parties. Next. Okay, I'm going to switch the government tort claim, which is a very important part, obviously, of any government claim. I'm going to switch that over to Christian.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so obviously, I know a lot of you probably know this, but when you have a government entity, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to file a government tort claim within 6 months pursuant to the government code. And I know that government claims are, sometimes make a lot of lawyers nervous. I get a ton of questions about them all the time and asking for samples and how we do them at our firm. So I wanted to spend some time this morning kind of walking through how we did it in this case. And I know this might be familiar to some of you, but hopefully we'll add a few tips and tricks that'll help you in your own practice. So the first thing I do when I'm looking to file a government claim, first I check to see if the government entity has a claim form. So in this case, the LA Metro, they do have a claim form. So I use this as my cover page for my government claim. So I fill out all the information that's required in the claim form, but then I also attach a longer pleading just to make sure that all of our bases are covered. And Jess, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I attach the claim form as the cover page to this pleading here. And I'll just kind of walk you through the information that we include in our government claims. Again, the law is very strict on this. You want to make sure that you're over-inclusive. You include all of your claimants. For example, there, the first item you see, I included all the claimants. So that's, as Jeff mentioned, the Susan, Alice, and Doug. And here, Doug had a very significant loss of consortium claim. So it was important to make sure that we named him and also put in the loss of consortium claim on this, because there actually is case law out there that if you don't include a loss of consortium claim in your government claim, you're actually barred from asserting it later. So you'll see how we did that as we walk through this. But another point that I want to mention here that sometimes people forget, on the claimant section, if you have a wrongful death case, you want to make sure that you include the estate as well to make sure that you're covered on that. Okay, next slide.
And why is it important on a wrongful death case to include the estate on the government claim?
Because potentially you have a survival action and also claims for funeral and burial expenses, which sometimes you waive at the end, but you might have a survival action and the estate has certain entitlements to different damages than your other plaintiffs might have in a case like this. And again, thankfully, we didn't have a death claim in this case. Client was very lucky. But the other items of information that we include, the address of our clients, and then our own address where we want everything to be mailed. And there, number 4, this is an important one, the nature of the injury. So I listed out Susan's injuries and also her daughter's emotional distress injuries as well to make sure that we were covered. And you'll also see there at line 10, I included the loss of consortium claim, again, because the case law says you have to have that, even though it's a derivative claim and can probably be gleaned from the complaint when you're alleging, that the husband suffered injuries as well, you want to include that language. And then number 5, the amount of claim damages, we always keep that general to leave us room at the end when we're negotiating the case or taking the case to trial. Basic information, date damage occurred, place where it occurred, and then the governmental entity is alleged to be at fault. You want to make sure that you have this absolutely correct and that the proper entities are named. I'll talk a little bit about a situation I had in Riverside where we had a train case where the referral lawyer accidentally named the wrong government entity. We got the case after the 6-month period and what we did with that. And that was a hurdle that we had to overcome. But anyway, next slide. The government code also asks you to include all the witnesses. Again, we try to list all the witnesses that we can. We actually also attach the police report to this case. And as Jeff will mention, there were actually multiple plaintiffs in this case because there are plaintiffs that sustained injuries on the bus, which again presented its own unique challenges. And number 10, the nature of the case. So here's where you really want to be over-inclusive, or at least that's what I like to do to make sure that I'm absolutely covered and I don't have to worry about this later. So the way I think about this is, what are the allegations that I'm going to include in my complaint? So I actually write my government claim as if I'm writing and submitting my complaint, because you're going to have to write it anyway, and you can just copy and paste from the government claim when it's time to write your complaint. So that way I make sure all my bases are covered. I've given it a lot of thought, and this is how we do our government claims at our firm. And I do want to add too that for everyone on the line, we're all about sharing. If any of you would like a sample of a government claim or how we do them, we're happy to provide that to you if that would be helpful to you. Next slide. And again, most of you know this, but the government claim has to be submitted within 6 months. And sometimes you encounter a situation, as the situation I just mentioned, what do you do if the 6-month claim is expired or if the government claim is defective and past the 6 months? Again, I had to do this before on a train case that was referred to us past the 6-month statute, and we actually had the wrong, or the referral lawyer had the wrong defendant government entity name. So we had to go through a procedure, which I'll talk about now. I just wanted to include this in case you find yourself in this situation. Next slide. So this is a procedure that I get asked about all the time on the listserv, and when people have questions about government cases. What do you do if you're past the 6 months, or if there's an issue with the government claim that you filed in the 6-month period? Well, the government code tells us what to do. First step, you have to file an application for leave to present a late claim. You present that to the government entity via mail, and it has to be within 1 year of the injury. If you're past the 1 year of the injury, you're out of luck. So one important point, though, is one thing a court will evaluate is whether or not you made the application within a reasonable time. So one factor that's going to weigh in your favor, if you're past the government claim statute by 6 months and 1 day, file your application immediately, because the statute actually says within a reasonable time. And the more reasonable time here is, the better off you're going to be saving the claim. So don't wait until that 1 year period expires. Get this application out to the government entity as soon as possible. Next slide. Okay, so what happens after you submit your application? Well, as we know, in all practicality, they're going to deny your application, right? The government entity is not going to cut you any breaks or do you any favors. But they have 45 days to do that. If they don't do it within 45 days, it's deemed denied after the 45th day. And here are the 4 factors that you're going to have to show in your application or show to the court if you have to file your petition as to why your government code was late or you need to file an government claim was late, or why you need to file an amended complaint or claim. So here are the 4 factors. You have to show that it was late because of mistake, inadvertent, surprise, or excusable neglect, and that the public entity won't be prejudiced, that the claimant was a minor. These are all ors, by the way. These are all factors that you can use to show, to present the late claim, or that the claimant was physically or mentally incapacitated or died. So those are the 4 ways that you can successfully present an application for leave to present a late claim. But as I said, they always deny it. So once you receive the denial, what do you do next? Next slide. So here's what you do. The government code tells us again, you actually have to file a petition with the Superior Court for leave to present a late claim. And again, I have a sample of this on that previous case, which I mentioned if anybody needs a copy. But basically, the government code tells you the 3 things that you have to show. And on that case, the Riverside train case, we actually were successful in bringing a late claim and we were able to allege the claim against the proper government entity, and the court granted us relief. So that was a success on that. So a little tip on late claims that I wanted to talk about. Next slide. All right, another topic is, sometimes you hear, well, you can't sue a government entity for negligence. Government code actually says that, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I'll show you how we did it in this case and the allegations that we made. So once you have your government claim all set up and the claim is denied or the time period passes, you want to file your complaint and get it on file. And here's a copy of the complaint that we filed in our case. Again, as Jeff mentioned, we had a negligence claim against the dump truck, and we also had products claims against the truck manufacturer because we were examining if there was a brake failure on the truck which caused the accident. And then we also included negligence claims against the Metro. So next slide. And again, here's what the government code again tells us, that you can't sue a public entity for negligence. So how do you allege negligence against a government entity? Well, I'll show you here how we did it in this case. So here are the statutory hooks that you can use in your complaint to get a government entity on the hook for the negligence of its employees and independent contractors. So Government Code 820A actually says that they're liable for the acts and omissions of their employees and independent contractors. And then Government Code 815.2 sets forth those provisions for employees, and 815.4 sets those provisions for independent contractors, because sometimes you have an independent contractor situation with a government entity. And when I'm writing my complaints, I always allege all 3 of these and include all 3 of these statutory references in the complaint to make sure that I'm covered. I also actually include them in my government claim, by the way. Next slide. All right, so this is just a sample of how we did it. Again, you'll see that I referenced the government code sections 820A, 815.4, and 815.2A. And here we put in the allegations. Again, you'll see this is a copy and paste from our government claims. We make sure that we have everything covered. And put in the allegations on how the government entity is on the hook for its employees' negligence. So in this case, the Metro, we allege, was on the hook for the acts and omissions of its employee, the bus driver. Next slide. And again, here are some more allegations, and we'd be happy to provide a sample for this if anybody's interested. Next slide. All right, so another one of the first things, I'm kind of taking the laboring oar to talk about how you get this case set up and then Jeff's going to talk about how we put the liability picture together. But one of the first things that we did in this case, and that I like to do on my own, which I think is so important, is actually go out to the scene. We all have cell phones with professional grade cameras on us at all times. There's really no excuse to not go out there yourself, get your hands a little dirty and look at the scene. You want to get an idea in your head as to where this happened, how this happened, how steep is the hill where the dump truck went down. And you'll see here that we actually found some interesting evidence that our accident reconstructionist was able to use later in making his opinions that the police actually missed and didn't get photos of. So here you'll see this is a picture that I took of the scrapes from the dump truck as it was entering the intersection coming off Stanley Avenue into Hollywood Boulevard, which shows that it's scraping along there as it's entering the intersection. Again, this was really helpful to our accident reconstructionist, Dave King, when he was putting together his reconstruction and forming his opinions. Next slide. And also here too, again, this is, I think I went out 3 months right after the incident, right when we got this case, and there's still the bus tire marks on the road. So again, more evidence, the more evidence you have, the better. And I was able to take this picture that shows the bus tire marks. Next slide. And again, there's a better picture. And I also like to send an investigator out too to get a second pair of eyes on the scene. But always I like to go out to the scene in cases like this, just so I have that idea in my head of how this accident happened. So the next thing, one of the initial things that we did in this case, we're figuring out, okay, so we've got our products claims. We've got to try to figure out why this dump truck went out into the road and was a cause of this incident. So we hired an expert to come look at the braking system in the subject truck, pulled it apart. This is one of the first things that we set up. And these are just a few photos from that inspection. And we did a full thorough analysis of the braking system on the truck. Next slide. Again, here are our experts taking a look. We pulled the whole thing apart and did an analysis trying to figure out if there was anything wrong with the truck. So what did the vehicle inspection tell us? Well, as Jeff mentioned earlier, there were a lot of aftermarket modifications on this truck, and actually the brake system was working properly. So here we are with no products liability case, and we were able to dismiss the manufacturer of the truck very early on in the case and to get them out. So with no products case, what do we do next? And I'll turn that over to Jeff to talk about the remaining defendants.
Okay. And also, by the way, with that product defendant, because we had a relationship with the lawyer for Peterbilt, they did waive costs in exchange for a dismissal in that case. And I just bring out the fact it's important, if you can, to get along with your opponent so that you have that ability to do that. Because once we were able to determine there wasn't a product case on the brake system, we got them out, and they didn't bring a cost bill or whatnot against our clients. So the MTA and the bus driver, we're looking at that bus, but the initial facts on that look pretty tough. The bus driver is driving down the street and a runaway dump truck hits the side of her bus and forces her into oncoming traffic, and she hits our vehicle. And boy, you look at that initially in the facts and you go, wow, I don't see a case there with the what could the bus driver have done? So we decided that we needed to dig a little bit. Well, what are some of the things that you think about a bus driver should do in circumstances like that? And one of those things is you got to look at you got to get the manual. We're going to talk about the manual, the training manual later. You got to get the manual, but you don't necessarily have these documents when you have to file your tort claim. You are better off to file that tort claim before you have that stuff, in the hopes that maybe you'll develop something, because you may not be able to bring them in later on. And in this case, some of the lawyers, in fact, that had people on the bus did not sue the bus company and were barred for making that claim. So then we were left with 30 people going after this JG Demolition, and we find out that they modified the truck, put an extra 8,000 to 10,000 pounds on it, didn't chalk the tires, and that they're a father-son business with no assets, and they have 750,000 in coverage. Just our client alone had somewhere between 2 and 4 million in medical bills. So we're in a world of hurt early on in this case as to what we can do. So next slide. But as you know, more than one party can be responsible for economic damages. So the 1% rule that we all know about. So why do you have to pursue that other case? You've got to pursue that other case to see what might uncover down the road. And if you have those economic damages, you're bound to do that. So we did do that. And we pushed forward with the case against the bus driver and the bus. Next slide. What are some of the things that you need to get? Well, this is all things that Christian got. The most important thing on here was a couple of different things. One was the onboard data recorder known as a smart drive video, which is different than the normal bus video. So I want to make that point. You might have a case where you have the bus video and it shows, you know, outside the bus and inside the bus, and we had that, and it wasn't really that helpful except for one thing. The outside of the bus video showed that that morning, in fact, the roadway was wet, that it had been raining. We could see that from the outside video, but more importantly, from the smart drive video, the smart drive video shows several things. It shows the last 20 seconds before impact. And it shows not only a view looking from the bus driver out to the front of the street, but it also shows a view of the bus driver driving the bus. It shows the speed of the bus, and it shows the maneuvers of the bus, and it shows the braking of the bus. All of those factors end up turning this case in our favor. Additionally, we got the driver training manual. So you have to get those driver training manuals. And in this case, they were gold, okay, because they showed what the bus driver's training was and what she should have done the date of this incident. Also, if you name the bus driver and you put in a negligent supervision, hiring and entrustment cause of action, you can get the bus driver's driving record. If you don't allege those things, you cannot. So it's always worth alleging those things, negligent hiring, supervision, entrustment, so that you can get the driver record. You might find something in there. I mean, what if they had 5 prior accidents and they kept this driver on? So I don't think we had that in this case, but it's still something you want to get. And also, you always want to get the bus route record. So they have a bus route. They're supposed to be at certain routes at certain times. Why do you want to get that? Well, you want to see if they're at the route they're supposed to be at the right time. Because bus drivers, sometimes when they get behind on their route, what do? They speed. They go too fast for the conditions. They're in a hurry to try and catch back up on that route. So you want to get that timing down, and they have a bus route with times, many times at the stops. All right, these are all things that we got. Christian worked diligently to get these in discovery. All right, next item. What are the defenses? So think about what if you're defending the case, you're defending the MTA, you got this easy defendant, you got a runaway dump truck, illegally modified with no chalk tires, hitting your bus. You look like you feel like you're in a pretty good spot. And then you're going to have the next question is, how in the world could a bus driver ever foresee something like this happening? How could she possibly have any fault in the case? That's sort of the position that the defense initially took until we dug deeper. Okay, next. So what did we find out? So now we start to look through, how about the police report? The police report put in the roadway conditions. Sometimes lawyers forget to look at this. Look at the roadway condition. You remember the pictures that the LAPD took and the newscast took? It was a sunny day and it was beautiful Los Angeles day, but we all know we live here. You know, it could rain in the morning and 2 hours later it's 75 or 80 degrees. But look, they checked the wet box on the police report. Very good for us, and I'll show you why later. Next. Okay, now we get into what the training is for the bus driver. Okay, so when the roadway is wet, this is from their own manual. When the roadway is wet, they're supposed to do what? reduced their speed by 1/3. So the speed limit here was 35 miles per hour. And many times, you're taking the drivers down. How fast are you going? I was, going about 35. Or if you took a bus driver's deposition, how fast are you going? I was going, 30 to 35. Well, because we had the smart drive, we knew exactly how fast she was going. And we knew that she, in fact, was speeding up a little bit right before this accident. We knew that she was going 38 at the time that the truck came out. We knew that from the smart drive because I had it digitally recorded on the video that you'll see. But so now you're starting to think about, wait a minute, with the accident reconstruction. Okay, so if the bus driver is going 35 miles per hour, that's about 52 feet per second. You can do that in your head, 1.5 times the speed. So in 2 seconds, 100 feet, boy, that's not going to be very much time for her to perceive and react to that truck. So that could be a problem. But what if she should have been going 25 miles per hour? What would that do to your perception reaction time in feet per second? Well, at 25 miles per hour, you're going, I think it's about 37.5 feet per second. And now you got a little bit more time here for that driver to perceive and react. So we're starting to develop now the accident reconstruction in this case based on their own documents that might show that we have a case. Next slide. Okay, now here's a very, very important part of the manual that came out. The drivers are trained to slow down and cover their brake as they approach the intersection. Okay, they're taught to drive defensively. So when the defense lawyer gets up and goes, how could we ever have foreseen that a dump truck would just come down the street and hit our bus? Well, actually, they are trained for that. They're trained to look for things like this. And more importantly, when they come through an intersection, in this case, the dump truck came through an intersection, they're trained to slow down and cover their brake. Now, why is that important? Think about if you were driving your own car and you're driving down the road and a dump truck darts out at you and you got to perceive that, move from your gas to your brake, and then brake. Most experts would put that perception reaction time at 1.5 seconds, right? 0.75 to perceive and 0.75 to react. But what if you already had your foot, you know how sometimes we cover our brake, we're driving around, we see kids on bikes, skateboards, those damn scooters, you get your foot off your gas and you start to cover your brake like, wow, is this person going to come out or what are they going to do? When you brake, when your foot is covering your brake, your perception reaction time is much faster. In fact, we were able to compute it more likely at 1 second would be the longest, and it could be shorter than 1 second. So now think about that. If you're able to shorten your perception reaction time from 1.5 seconds to 1 second, and you're able to create the speed at 25 miles per hour, which is 37.5 feet per second instead of 52.5 feet per second, well, maybe you might be able to avoid the accident. So these are the things now a great reconstructionist like Dave King from MRIA Forensics, I start talking about. And he starts running programs on this, right? You start doing the PC crash and start testing out what if this, what if that. Next slide. So what do they teach their drivers on the liability? You talk about foreseeability, leave yourself a way out, right? Next slide. These are all from their own documents now. Slow down and cover your brake as you approach the intersection. So this gives also the foundation for your accident reconstruction human factors people to be able to talk about the quicker perception reaction time, because there actually is documents showing that this is what should be done if they follow their own rules. And these are all documents, of course, that your bus driving expert is going to love too. But man, think about being able to prove your case standard of care with the defendant's own training manual documents. Pretty powerful. Next.
And again, Jeff, if I can just hop in on one
Please.
point here, kind of similar to what I was talking about going out to the scene and doing it yourself. A lot of us, we get busy, we've got depositions, we've got trial. Sometimes it's pretty tempting to kick document review to a paralegal or to somebody else, a law clerk. But again, this case especially paints the picture. I mean, they gave us a ton of documents in this case, thousands, and we really took the time, Jeff and I, to go through this ourselves, and our paralegals are always helpful, and the law clerks are always helpful for providing their insight. But there's no substitute for going through the file and reviewing everything yourself, and bring your highlighter with you, because man, we really found some gems in this, as Jeff's going to continue to go through that.
Okay, so think about this. I'm going to keep putting that flash behind your head. Defense saying foreseeability, it's unforeseeable. Look at this document. When you drive, you need to think defensively, which means what? Expect other vehicles to pull out in front of you, which is exactly what happened in this case. So there we go. So I'm able to take the bus driver's deposition by videotape. And by the way, always take the bus driver's deposition by videotape unless there's any question on that. Not only do you want to name them, but they move around, they might be unavailable, but you've got to have that video, and you want to be able to show your documents on the video with the deposition, so that if you have to play these to the jury, you're able to pull these up. I used to have to put them up on an easel, and trying to do it with the video and the easel, and it gets a little funky sometimes. Here, there's now ways to do it on the video where you can actually pull it up, document while they're testifying on the video, and it's clear. Because think about if you're going to be presenting that to the jury. Think about that while you're taking the deposition of the driver. How am I going to present this to a jury so they can see these documents while they're talking about them? You can have them hold them up, and the camera can zoom in. That I used to do that, but now they have a side-by-side. You can do that. So you want to be able to have this all set up before you take the deposition. So you're ready to go with these exhibits as you go through the deposition. I highly recommend that. Take a little time, practice if you need to, and practice with the technology if you need to. So make sure you get it so it'll come out right on the video. Next slide. One of the most dangerous areas in any route is the intersection. So think about the examination question. Isn't it true that you were trained that one of the most dangerous areas in your bus route is at any intersection? Yes. And here's the proof of that, right? And you were trained on that. That's right. And you were trained to foresee that people might pull out in front of you. Yes. You were trained that you should cover your brake when you go through intersections if there's any question, right? Yes. So now you're starting to build that foundation and the evidence to allow you to argue a lower perception reaction time in the case. And again, when you cover that, combine that with the speed difference, it's going to prove to be pretty good for us in this case. All right, next slide. Advanced driving, defensive driving. All these drivers, most of them have taken this course. Visually identifying the hazard is not enough. What does it say? You need to anticipate the action of others and plan your defense. When you see a dump truck coming at you, now the driver of the bus said, hey, I saw the dump truck. I couldn't tell if there was a driver in it or not, and I thought he was going to stop. I mean, yeah, that's true. You could probably do that, but what was your training? You need to anticipate the action of others and plan your defenses. You have to anticipate that driver might not stop, and that's part of the training. And that is so you can see how we're building the blocks now, how it looks like that driver didn't do some of the things she was trained to do. Next slide. So now they have to acknowledge, even and I like to take the bus training supervisor's deposition, because that always is a situation where you go through the manual and that bus driver trainer, who is an expert really in the case, right? He's going to go through and agree with what's in the manual. And he's going to say that he trained all his drivers on that manual, and he expected them, or she expected them, to follow that training, right? And so this is all stuff that comes out of the defense. You can call these witnesses under evidence code 776, and you lay the whole thing out before you even have to call your bus driving expert, right? So now you have their own people talking about the standard of care and that they got the training And if she did this, you know, sometimes if she failed to do that, was a violation of her training. I mean, what are they going to say? They have to say yes on that. They're going to hem and haw and look bad trying to do it. But at the end of the day, you stay with that question. If they failed to follow their training, to cover their brake, to slow down, to anticipate that, you will agree that that is a violation of their training, right? Yes, eventually they will admit to that. And if they don't admit to it, they look terrible. Okay, next. So here's kind of a build-up slide that summarizes what I just said. Use the defendant's own training and safety documentation, policies, and procedures to set the standard of care and establish foreseeability of the case. And so we did that in this case with their own documents and with their own witnesses. Next. Okay, so then what do we do? Well, we still had the problem of sitting there going, how much time, and how fast, and how could you foresee this? And who would ever think that a dump truck would come, barreling down a hill, and for visual cues and all of those things. So one of the things we did is we asked her, how fast were you going? She says, I don't remember. I think I'm going 30 to 35, blah, blah, blah. And then we pull up, then we get that smart drive. And I showed her the smart drive video during the deposition, but I also took still slides of it about every half a second. And we had those printed out so that I could have her establish those while you're going, because those are good blowups for the jury. When you show the video, it goes pretty fast. It's only a couple of seconds. So you want to have some stills made of that video. So what is it established? Number one, that the speed limit was 35. We had that in the police report. Number two, the smart drive established she was going 38 at the time of the incident. Now, here's another thing that the smart drive pulled out that was key to the case, and that's why you want to get this. The smart drive will show whether or not she swerved first or she braked first, okay? Now, that is an important thing. If any of you grew up in a rural area, like I grew up in a rural area of Bainbridge Island, Washington, we have deer that come out. And so one of the things I've taught in driver's ed when I was 16 years old is if a deer comes out in the road, you're supposed to brake and hit the deer. You are not supposed to swerve onto oncoming traffic and potentially take out a whole family on the other side of the road. Now, it's a hard concept, and a lot of people have difficulty with it, but I'm telling you, that's the rule. That's the rule you're taught in those areas. But, but what about a bus driver in an urban area? Well, guess what? In an urban area, the bus drivers are taught to brake and hit the car. They're taught they're not to swerve, because the danger of a 40,000-pound, just think about it, the danger of a 40,000-pound bus swerving across the double yellow line into oncoming traffic, she could have taken out 15 cars. I mean, it would just be terrible, as opposed to hitting the dump truck, right? Or the dump truck hitting her. So then she said, well, I don't think I swerved. I think it was the truck hit me. And that's what caused me to go across the center line. Well, guess what? She swerved. The smart drive showed that she swerved before the truck hit her. And the reason it did that is because you can see the speed at the time of the swerve. So that's why this was so helpful. Next slide. And by the way, the bus driver training is to brake before swerve. Okay, just so you know, that's the rule. And so we had to go over that rule with her, and then she wasn't sure. We went back over it, and eventually she admitted. So now let's look at your accident reconstruction now. Now we're starting to put some meat on a theory. Let's go back. Yeah, stay here for a second. You're starting to put some meat on that bone now that talks about reconstruction. So what about the fact that if she was going 25 instead of 35 in the 35 zone, feet per second on that? She acknowledged she's trained to brake before swerving. Okay, very important admission in the case. And then I said, well, did you swerve before you braked? I don't remember, right? So now we go to the next slide.
And
now
Jeff,
this is
go
ahead.
Before we get into that, we've got about 20 minutes probably or so left in our presentation. Jeff's going to walk you through the smart drive and what we were able to show and how we were able to put the reconstruction together. But I do want to remind you, we have a few questions already, but if anybody who's on who has some questions about what we've talked about so far, if you want to type those in on the right, we'll try to cover as many as we can before the end of our time here with you this morning. Okay, Jeff.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so I'm gonna show you what. So this is a still blow up from the smart drive. So on the left is the view of the bus driver looking out the front of the bus, and on the right is the camera looking at the bus driver. You can see her to the right with a whole bunch of passengers standing up. All right. Now, as you go down, you see two half circles. And the right half circle is the speed, 31 miles per hour. Okay. And then below that, there is a green, a red, and a blue box. Those are going to be important later on because those are going to show you now in a second or two what the maneuvers of the bus were. But I want you to kind of put yourself in control of this now. What else can we see from the video on the front of the bus? That the roadway was really wet, right? It is really wet. And that is the evidence supporting our theory. Under their manual, they're supposed to reduce their speed by 1/3. Next slide. Okay, so now, and you, by the way, at the bottom is the actual hour, minutes, and seconds that go on with the slide. So 7:54 in the morning, and then like 19 something seconds, and you'll see this thing goes about every 0.2 seconds, something like that. All right, now we're going through this isn't the intersection where it happened. So this is the intersection before that had a light before our accident, and our actual accident did not have a light, but it was still an intersection. So now look at her speed now. She's up to 34 miles per hour. The roadway's wet. She's not following her training. Next slide. Now you're at 17:54, 24 seconds. Okay, now this apartment building to the right here, the dump truck is just to the left of that. You can't see it that great in this picture, but it's starting to come down the hill. The nose of that dump truck is now visible, you know, a couple of seconds out now. And look at her speed, 37 miles per hour. Now here is important. Now look at the bottom of this slide. Shows the red is the braking or the speed, and the blue is the direction of travel or the swerve. Okay, so the reason why we know she swerved before she braked is because the big dip in that red line is the brake. The little gradual red line going down is just a deceleration during her swerve. Okay, and these are all, you know, experts will go through and testify about all this stuff. So look at her speed now. She's at 37 miles per hour. She's about 2 seconds or so out from impact right now, and but this is going to show that she swerved first. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this was our most important slide because it shows a couple of seconds before impact, she's gone up to 38 miles per hour, and that truck, which you can't see it so great in here, is just behind the palm trees off to the right. Next slide. And there's the impact. Okay, so there's the impact. You can see the driver. And so we are pulled out and show with our expert that she swerved before she braked. She's going 38 miles per hour, and right at impact, it slows down a little bit to 37, but you know, not enough. So now what do we do? So now you get a great guy like Dave King from Mia Forensic, and he goes through and he does a PC crash. I said, run that thing at 25 miles per hour at a 1 second perception reaction time. He was so excited that he called me at like 11 o'clock at night after he completed the testing on that. Next slide. These are the people that you need on these cases now: recon, a bus expert, and human factors. In this case, we were just going to use the bus driver training from the MTA as a hostile witness bus expert because he laid out everything that we had in our case. Next slide. So had they followed their own policies and procedures, traveling at 25 miles per hour with a 1 second perception reaction time, guess what? This is what Dave called me with. He was so excited. He called me at night and said, guess what? I think the bus would completely miss the dump truck would have gone right through the intersection and completely missed the bus, or the bus would have hit the side of the dump truck at very low speed. You now have a winning case against the MTA. And they're using their own documents and the reconstruction. Look at this. Look how this thing went from looked like we had no case, and we had a case against a dump truck with 35 people splitting up $750,000 to $7.5 million settlement. Next slide.
Jeff, could I ask you a quick question just on
Sure.
that? So typical reaction, perception reaction time is 1.5 seconds, right?
Yes.
Why did, if you remember, why did Dave King, why did he do an analysis at 1 second?
Okay, so when we combined several things. We were able to combine the MTA training that said when you're going through an intersection, which this was an intersection, you're supposed to slow down and cover your brake. That speeds up your perception reaction time to maybe even less than a second. It could be 0.75. Think about, what I said earlier. Think about when you're driving down the road and you have an unanticipated dart out in front of you, you go from your gas to your brake, and you perceive it and you react. That takes you 1.5 seconds. If you haven't anticipated something you're supposed to anticipate, and it's and you also already have your foot off the gas and over covering the brake, then when it comes out, you slam on your brake, it's less than a second. So that's why we're able to use that effectively and properly in this case, by the way, with a combination of their own documents and their own training that they had. And there's a number of studies that have done on the different types of expected versus unexpected and all that, but we use just their own training on that. At the intersection, cover the brake. When you're covering your brake, you're going to be able to react much quicker than you are if you're on the gas at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what we did is I actually, normally I don't have an accident reconstructionist do a report, but in this case, for the mediation, I actually had Dave do a written report so they could send that to the MTA, and the MTA, they need to go to the board and all that. And we gave them this stuff that said, look, you got a huge problem here, and we have a really badly hurt client who's a really nice lady, and everyone will agree she's a totally innocent victim driving down the number 2 lane, going the opposite way, taking her daughter to school in the morning, and she gets crushed by a bus, 40,000-pound bus. And look what you guys could and should have done. And so that's how we were able to put together that reconstruction, and it was unbelievable. Next slide. Okay, that's it. So talk about, you think about feet per second, speeds, and perception reaction times, and you can work with those depending on what your facts are. And you might develop facts that help you on those things, and that's what we did in this case.
Yeah, and so again, it comes back to that question, how did you win that case? Again, when I tell my friends, law school buddies, family members, I play ice hockey with a group, my hockey buddies, they say, how did you do that? Well, that's how we did it. So it was a $7.5 million global settlement, and with $7.4 million coming from the MTA. So we're very proud of the work that we've done on this case, and we hope that presentation was helpful to you. But we also wanted to talk a little bit about our clients and about the aftermath of this case and what happened, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now that is depressing, and we feel distant, but this was really a pretty good feel-good story that we wanted to share with you on this Thursday heading into the holiday weekend. So next slide. So here are our clients. That's Alice on the left and Doug in the middle and Susan on the right. And they were actually, you can see Susan made a miraculous recovery. I mean, you saw the medical illustrations. It's really amazing how she recovered. And it was really the support of her family that helped to get her through that. She'd be the first to tell you that. And it's just really a tremendous, tremendous story that she and her family have to tell. And they were featured on the Today Show. And you can see on the next slide, they were featured in the New York Post. And you can see there on the right, that's a you can see there on the right, that's a picture of Susan couple months after the accident. You can see how she had to learn to walk again. I mean, the recovery that this woman made was absolutely miraculous. And that's her husband, Doug, who's on her right there. And Jeff will tell you as well, and you all know it as trial lawyers, your case is only as strong as your plaintiffs and the people that you represent. And we were really fortunate to represent this great family. Even though the case was tough, having them in our corner. And Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about how helpful Doug was throughout the case?
Okay, so you never know who your client's going to be and whatnot. So Doug Segal, one of the best guys I've ever met in my life. He was a television writer, is a television writer, very thoughtful, very smart, and he helped in the case. He wanted to go to the depositions of some of the key players. He came. He had great ideas. So that one thing I tell you is obviously get to know your client and reach out to them. And he was there, and we would talk and strategize on things. But one of the things that sticks out to me that I remembered the most is that I asked him to write a couple of pages about what his relationship was with his wife, Susan, before the accident, and how it's changed after the accident, which, that's an important part of a loss consortium claim and whatnot. Well, this guy wrote 8 pages, typed 8 pages, and I'm walking by my secretary, legal assistant Sherry Dempsey's desk one day, and she's over there, and I see her, and she's crying, and I'm like, oh, what's going on, Sherry? And she's like, oh my God, I'm reading the statement from Doug Segal. I said, yeah. And she goes, why can't I meet a guy like this? And I go, there it is. This guy, I mean, I get a little emotional now when I start feeling about it, but he's one of the most incredible guys in the incredible family that I've ever represented. So think about including them in the strategies of the case sometimes, if it's the right client to do that with. Because not only did he, help his whole family get through this, but the guy went on and wrote a book so he could help other people that might go through this. And he wrote the Reader's Digest, and then he wrote this book called Struck, okay? And I highly recommend this book to maybe your clients. If you have people that are really badly injured, they're depressed, they're sad, the whole family is, devastated. And he talks about how he worked through all of this. And he has some of his emails and whatnot. It's just unbelievable. Here's a guy, he married his college sweetheart. They're from Massachusetts. They move out here, and their whole life changed like that. And you think about it, that's what happens in a lot of our cases, right? A lot of our clients, their whole life changes in 2 seconds, and this did. And I just want to give a shout out then to, my wife's in a book club. In the book club, I said, you ought to think about reading this book. It might be a good book for your book club. So it was like 15 gals down here in the South Bay. They went, and I said, hey, I think Doug will come to our house. This is before COVID, of course. Come to our house and talk to you about. So they all read the book, and then he came with Susan, and they talked to in our living room with about 15, 16 book club members, and it was emotional. I mean, I felt it, and it's still raw, a number of years later. But how human beings, how we can work through this stuff and find joy and happiness in our lives, I think it matters. I think it matters. It mattered before this whole COVID thing, but I think it matters even more now, because now we're starting to appreciate all the little things that we had that, that maybe we took for granted before. So those are my thoughts. You can get it I think on Amazon. I think his book is on Amazon, and it's a paperback, and it's very fast read, but I bought a bunch of them, and I give them to clients that are very badly injured. I think it helps. Go ahead,
it's a pretty uplifting story. And just, we wanted to leave you with just a short clip, which shows a little bit about the accident, but also more about our clients and what they went through, just to kind of give this whole presentation context. So Jess, if you can play the clip, it's only a couple minutes.
We do have breaking news. A dump truck collides with a bus, sending it head-on into a car. Dozens of people are hurt. We'll have a live report.
Inside that sedan was a woman and a 10-year-old girl.
I unbuckled my seatbelt. I got out as fast as I could, and all I could think was, I have to call Dad. I need Dad here.
I picked up the phone, and it was Al on the other line saying, Dad, you have to come Mom's been in a car accident. And I said, are you okay? She said, yeah. I said, is Mom okay? No, I don't think so. Come quick.
Her neck was snapped backwards, her arms were different directions, and her eyes were rolled up in her head.
Our daughter miraculously walked away from the accident uninjured, but Susan broke nearly every bone in her body, including her neck.
Spoiler alert, I survived.
Against all expectations.
It's amazing, really. To know and feel that people are thinking about you and loving you and praying for you, that is something really powerful. That love absolutely lifts you up. Our story is about much more than the accident and my recovery. It's about how people survive these challenges.
It's about how incredibly valuable community is and how people really do show up for one another in times of crisis to remind us that we're not alone.
And it's a love story, a true testament to how love has the power to heal. It's kind of the truth. All this love comes pouring at you, and it's a wonderful validation of living in the world today and having friends and people, and it healed me. It really did heal me.
All right, so there you go. And when you have a tough case, like we just outlined to you, with challenges and obstacles, man, when you have clients like that, it makes your job a lot easier. And having them as clients was a huge motivator for us. So we wanted to share that last little bit with you, just for a feel-good story to leave you with, but also to, they were a huge part of the case, as the plaintiffs always are. So next slide. And again, Doug works in Hollywood, and in this case, we see so many tragedies in our business. This was really a case that ended with a Hollywood happy ending, which was very fitting for their family, given that they're in the movie business. So we'll conclude with that. We do have a lot of questions, but before we get to the questions, here's the contact information for Jeff or I. As I said, we're all about sharing at our firm. If there's anything that we can help you with in any of your cases, or anything related to cases against the MTA or government claim cases, we do employment cases, all kinds of stuff. So just shoot us an email, even if you want to run something by us or get some sample discovery. We're more than happy to provide that. So let me go through a few questions here that we have before we wrap up. We'll try to answer as many as we can. Jeff, one question for you. Who did you use for the medical illustrations that we saw at the beginning?
I used a company called MLI out of Georgia. They do everything over the internet. They're very good price, and they have a website. I'm sure it's called MLI Illustrations. You look them up, and they'll say you can take pictures of the X-rays and everything, and just email it to them, and they'll do the illustrations for very inexpensive now.
Okay. And then we have a couple questions asking about, can you send this outline in your complaint, email the complaint, the sample discovery? Yeah, absolutely. If you email me after this presentation is over, I'd be happy to get that to you as soon as possible. And this outline, as well as this presentation, is also going to be up on our website after this is done. So you'll be able to access that there, but of course, we're happy to send that. Another question, Jeff. You mentioned that there are multiple plaintiffs in the case. Was this a coordinated proceeding, or how did you coordinate discovery in this case with that many plaintiffs?
Yeah, so it was consolidated, but it was not coordinated. And that's a great question, because one of the problems we had is once we got everybody resolved with the MTA, we had to figure out how the heck do we divide up the 750 with the dump truck people, because they're just going to file bankruptcy, right? So if we didn't take the money, so we had to go. We went to Judicate West. We had a mediator. I'm trying to think of who it was. I think it was Mike Moorhead. He did a division, and we based the division based on the percentages of the settlement in the MTA case. So you took the total number from the MTA case and then figured out what was your number as a percentage of that. And then that's what we did for the settlement numbers. It took months to get that done, but we did get it done. Great question.
And along that same vein, why did you keep JG Demolition, the dump truck defendant, in the case when you could have just settled with them at the beginning?
Right. Well, because we could never get all the plaintiffs to agree on a number. So that's number one. But number two, if we went to trial in that case, I wanted the lawyer for JG to be representing JG, not have an empty chair there, or in a sense, that becomes me having to represent JG. And the jury's confused by that. They go, why isn't he blaming the dump truck? And they're the ones, blah, blah, blah. So it's much more important, I think, to keep them in the case to the very end, and to have them have their own lawyers with their own insurance defending them. And then also you can have them help say, blame the bus too. So, but that's a great question. And there was no way even if I wanted to, if we could have got all the plaintiffs to agree, which we couldn't, but if we could have, I still wouldn't have done it for that reason. If we go to trial, I want them to have their own counsel there. Most of the time, there could be exceptions to that, but most of the time.
Okay, so here's another question, one that I'll take because it's kind of on the government claim issue. Do you presume that there will be an estate in a serious accident should a potential future estate be named in the tort claim, even if at the moment you prepare it, the client is not deceased but merely seriously injured? Good question. I think the answer is no. You wouldn't have a cause of action for wrongful death, and that cause of action would not accrue until the plaintiff is actually deceased. So, but you would have to file another government claim, I would think. I haven't encountered that scenario before in my practice where the client is injured and then later passes away, but I would think that you would have to do an amended government claim or file a whole new government claim once that wrongful death cause of action accrued. And again, you'd want to immediately do that within 6 months of the date of the decedent's passing.
Right. I've had that exact issue before, I just say, and I was able to go to the government entity lawyer and go, hey, person passed away, I want to amend, or I can just file a new one, we can start everything over, what do you want to do? And they usually would agree to just allow me to amend.
And again, another question, this may have been answered, but I missed it. Is there going to be a video replay of the entire program available after viewing the program? If so, how will it be accessed? Yeah, we will be posting this on our website if you want to go back and take a look. And again, we could email you the PowerPoint presentation as well. And a lot of people also have questions about the MCLE. So Jess Hogan at our firm, she helps to handle that and coordinate that. If you have issues with that, we have to apply for the MCLE after this is over. So it may take a while, but we have been successful in some of our other programs in getting MCLE credit. So please follow up with us if you have any issues. And with that, I think we'll conclude the program. We're a little bit early today, but it is the holiday weekend. So we've got one more day left of work before the holiday weekend. So we'll conclude a little early. Jeff, do you have anything else to add?
No, just keep fighting the fight and never give up. That's what I have.
Okay, well, thank you again, everyone, for spending your morning with us. We really appreciate it. We know that you've got a million things other going on, maybe with kids at school and stuff with your own practices, and we appreciate you taking the time to hear about our case and about our clients. We are going to have another webinar on our Method for Success program. We do this every 2 weeks, so if you're on this webinar, you're probably on our email list, so be on the lookout for that. We've got a couple more programs coming up through the fall, which I think will be really interesting. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you soon, and please reach out if we can help in any way.
Okay.